So today we're starting with classes. We did the forms, advanced form. Now we're going to start with classes. So classes, you guys learned the classes in JavaScript. We did the classes. We did the construction functions, and then we converted them into classes. We did the prototype, as you remember, and then the prototype, we changed it to classes. So classes are not native to JavaScript, so they're not part of JavaScript. They're just a syntactic sugar, as they say, like a cover for the constructor functions and prototypes. So, but classes are elegant. They're simpler than constructor functions and also prototype inheritance. They're much simpler, much easier to understand. But when it comes to React, as you have seen, we've been using a functional components. So functional components are the kind of like the new way of doing something or of building components in React. So classes were what React started with. So when React came out, the first thing they had was classes. So now if you go to any project that was built with React, maybe a few years ago, you will see that they're all built with class components. So that's why it's important to understand how class components work, how they are constructed, and how to convert from class component to functional component and vice versa. So in the introduction, it says today we will learn about classes in React. We will use classes to build our components. Class components have been a big part of React ecosystem because they brought a lot of functionality that we normally didn't get with the React API when using functional components. And then now with hooks, that functionality is available in function components. However, a lot of projects, we will still have class components in them. So that's kind of like the introduction. What we will cover today, our objective would be, we will explain at the end of this class, you should be able to explain class components. You should be able to use class components to render some state data to the DOM. You should be able to share data between components using state and props. And you should be able to respond to event triggers by user interaction and handle user inputs via form in React. And we will see that. We'll go through all this one at a time. So as I said, class components. So classes in JavaScript in general. So class in JavaScript it's not same as other classes in other languages. So here it says classes in JavaScript are built on prototypes. So you guys learned prototypes, when we use a functional constructor functions, but also have some syntactic and semantics that are not shared with ES5 class-like semantics. So this is kind of like the style of classes in JavaScript in general. So you have a class and then you have a constructor. Remember that we learned about constructor functions. So constructor functions were functions that you could use to create an object, right? So if we go to something like, let's go to Rebel and create a new JavaScript file. That's if I can log in. Okay, let's see. So not a team. I just want to add a new node file. So who can help me build a basic JavaScript constructor function? If you guys remember, we did in JavaScript lessons. Remember, we can use this style. So let's use this height and width. How do we build a constructor function, a basic one? So let's convert this class to a constructor function instead of class. Who remembers that?
I'm not 100% sure.
Mhm.
I think like you're gonna start with the constant function. It's like normal function.
Normal function. Okay, and then we give it the name. Let's give it the same name. Remember that constructor functions need to start with a capital letter, just like classes. And then inside here, we're just gonna open it as a function.
And you're
So,
gonna
yep, go ahead.
now you're gonna say constructor.
Okay, so remember that classes have here constructor. So constructor functions are this. This is the constructor function in class. So when you build an actual constructor function, you don't need the constructor function in here. So
You're gonna use the super.
so we could use so super you can use it in class. So all that is in class. So constructor function are basically just this part. Okay. So we're gonna use height and width right here. Height and width. And then in here we could say this dot height is equal to, we could say height, right? So and then we say this dot width is equal to width. And that's it for constructor functions. So it's that basic when you build a constructor function. And then from this, you could create a object. So you could say something like, let's create something called size, and then say new rectangle. And then in here we can pass two things. So usually we pass two numbers. So 3 and 5. Now, if we call this, if we console log this, it should create a object for us. So if we console log this size and run it, it creates an object for us, as you can see here. So it took the numbers and it ran with this constructor function, and then it created the object. So this is an object creator, basically. So constructor functions are object creators. And then we used a prototypes to create methods for this. You could also create a method inside here if you want. So you could, create the same way. So all that I'm saying is the classes, they came from the constructor function. This is where they came from. So that was the original idea. And then the JavaScript team, they realized that classes are a little bit cleaner. And also people who are coming from other languages like Java and other languages, they understand what classes are. So classes are basically a function or an object, because functions are also objects in JavaScript. So don't confuse about anything. Classes are objects, and also they are also class. They are also function. So that's the confusing part. So in general, classes have something called constructor, right? And then what else can we put inside classes? What other thing can we put inside classes? So let's copy this. Let's get rid of this. So what can we put inside here?
Method.
A method, yes. So we can put here a method. So method. So this is a method is a function. So method is a basic function, and we will see examples of that. So I'm just giving it, I'm keeping it simple right now. So a function that will do something for us. Remember, if we want to use something like super and things like that, we need to create what do we need to create if we want to use super? Can we use super in here? And
blueprint.
Okay, so the class itself is blueprint. So classes are blueprints. So this classes equal to blueprint. But can we just put a super here? And what does super do?
Super. I'm not sure, but I think you put super when you want to create a blueprint from like an object. So you have it. You have an object on the top, and then you copy it, and you put it the extended class.
Okay, so you're on the right track. So
you're gonna need a parent and a child, and you're gonna use extend.
yep, so you're on the right track. So this is the parent class, and we cannot use super in the parent class. So if we want to use super, we have to create a extended. So let's say something like class, let's say something like square. And then we say extends rectangle, right? And that's how we're going to create this is a child class. So we're going to extend this class. Now, if we want to grab all this constructor, we could say everything in the constructor, we could say super. And that way we have everything in here. And now if we can even test here and run something, but in general, extends connects this class, the square class, to this class, and then super copies the methods and the constructor, right? All these are called properties, right? So that's how we will use it. So you don't have to worry about the super right now, since this project, the React project, is going to be different. We're going to be using the extends, but we're not going to be using super in the React. All right, hopefully. Okay, so that generally that is the class, right? You guys remember, some of you, it's been a while, so it's fine if you don't remember all of it. Actually, you put it inside the constructor, the super. But yeah, it's fine if you don't remember. But the blueprint for the React class is a little bit different. So the React class starts with, so let's go here. Let me put this, let me grab here. TM, give me 1 second. So the React class is a little bit different than the actual JavaScript class, right? So in here, we can get rid of all this, okay? And this would be React class. It's a little bit different. So it starts with class, right? And then you give the component. So you say, let's say app.js or the app or whatever, the component name. And then you say extends React.component, right? So React.component is another class that was created by React, right? So we're inheriting that class that was created by React. And then we're just gonna open inside, and here's where we do everything else. So in here, we have to create the constructor. So constructor. The constructor will have our state, right? So if you want to do any state, you'll have the constructor here. And here's where we actually declare the super. I was saying we don't need it, but in React, you put it inside the constructor here. That will inherit all the properties we need from React. Then your state. So remember that in functional component, we were doing something like const, and then we were doing something like this, team, and then set team, right? This was our state, and then we say use state, and this is a hook. So this is how we declared our state. But in class component, this is not how we declare our state. In class component, inside here, we say this. We say this dot state is equal to, and then we create an object. Inside this object, you could create multiple states. So let's say if we want to create team, then we say team, and then in here we put whatever we're going to put in here. So you could leave an empty array if you like. Let's say we want to create another state. So let's say const. We want to create score, set score, and then this is how we would do in what we call in functional component. And here you could put an empty array if you like to initialize. In here you set up a score. So you say score, and then that's how you do it. So I hope you see the comparison between the states. So all these states will go underneath this dot state, and there will be an object, and you don't need this set. So this set is by default in class component. This set would be so set team. Let's say set team will be this dot set state. That's what you will use instead of set team. Let's say here, and also the same thing for the score. Instead of that, so instead of set score, you use this dot set state. So this dot set state is the general that you're going to be using. So you use it for all your state. So that will be the only method that will modify the state, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Any question about that, about the comparison?
Do you have to write this this dot set state in the constructor function?
No. So inside the constructor function, you only declare the state, but outside, let's say you have a function here. Let's say outside you have a function to change the state, right? Then in here, you declare the function. You say something like increase. You say something like that, and then inside here you say this dot set state, and then you could increase one of the states. So you could say this dot state dot team, then something like plus or something like that, +1 or whatever. This is not correct, I think, but in general, the idea, this is the idea. So you will always use this dot set state if you want to change any of this state, right? And here is how you actually grab one of the states, right? So if there is something here, let's say there's an object here, and this object would be name, let's say Ali. Then if you want to grab that name, then you will say, sorry about that. Then you will say, this dot state dot team dot name, right? That's how you'll grab it. So always it's going to be this dot state dot team. So in that sense, this is how when it comes to states, this is how it's different when it comes from functional component. Another thing that's different would be how do you render the JSX, right? Remember in
before you move on, how do you pass data to the state? So if you declare your date, I mean your state like this way you put it.
Mm-hmm.
Later on when you want to pass data to the state, like do you have to use the state and then open curly, not curly, but just open parenthesis and then you put the data in there?
Yeah, so if you want to modify any of these two states, you will use this dot set state. So you say this dot set state, right? You have to spell it like this. And then you will grab the one that you want to modify. So this will be this state dot team, and then you will modify that way, right? And if you want to add something to it, then you of course will do the copying of this state, right? Like we did in functional component. You will copy it first, of course, put it inside an object, copy it, and then modify what do you need to modify here. So you will add a name. You'll add a new name here. So you could say Mohammed here, right?
So when you console log team,
yeah.
By the way, you use the function set state for all the variables.
For all states. So this is two states, and always you use this dot set state to modify.
Okay.
Them.
To modify any of them. Okay.
Any of them, and then you just tell which one to modify.
So then, when you console log team, for example, will it be the first? Will it just replace Ali, or it will show both?
So this I just did on top of my head. So this will replace Ali. So now this, let's see if we can we have to use the render here to, so render, which I was gonna tell you about it, but I'll explain what it is. So render, and then we'll say return. And this would be our JSX where we declare JSX. So let's put a div here, closing div. This might not run because right now we're not inside a React. So let's do the running inside code sandbox, because now it doesn't understand what this is because we're not importing React anywhere. So I was just showing how the the difference.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a data, and you console log it, right?
Mhm.
You just have a data, right? Let's say you have responsive data, and
Yeah.
you just want to pass it to the state. I just want to know how to pass that to the state.
Okay. So give me a second. Let me set up a quick React component. So this is our app.js. So instead of this, we're going to change it to our initial one. So let's import React. Yeah. Okay, it's comma here. Missing. And this will not work. Okay. And here we declare something. P test P. Okay. So that should render. Oh, I have to export. For default app. All right. So now we're gonna look at the console log. So if we want to console log anything, we put it inside here. So inside the render. So any JavaScript you want to run, you put it inside the render. So if we want to console log, we can console log the theme. Let's just start with that. So we say this dot state dot theme, and that will console log this object with the theme, right? There's another object inside the name. So if you want to grab the name, we just say dot name, and that will, I mean, we have to, it's inside an array, so we have to loop through it. But let's say we want to modify the name. So inside here we can say this dot set state, and then inside here we'll copy the state, the current state, which would be this dot set state, this dot state dot theme, and then modify the name with Hamid. So now if we grab the latest one, let's see. This dot set state, and then theme. Okay, name.
Kind of breaking up.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you did.
All right. So this dot state dot theme. I think it's the object, this array that's making the issues. Okay. So if we do that, then okay, I have to show you in the example, but right now it's kind of not working for us. But yeah, you could definitely change the state by using this dot set state. I'll show you in the example because we don't want to take too much time. In the example, there's a way to modify the state, and I will show you that.
Is this just me or I can't hear?
Can you guys hear me? Anyone?
Yes, معنا.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's clear. Maybe log out and log back in. Maybe that will help.
Adinku si fiican baad ii maqlaysiin soo ma?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll get to the modifying part, but in general, right now, what I'm talking about is the difference between functional component and class component. So right now, tell me if you see any other, let's delete that. What other difference do you see other than the constructor and the class and what we just talked about? What other difference do you see?
The rendering is different as well.
Yes, so the rendering is different. It's a big one. So the rendering, when you want to run a class component, you have to put your JSX inside the render. And render is a function. So as you can see here, you have to write it like this: render, and then give it a curly bracket, and then put the return inside the render, right? And that's how you render. This is how it's set up in React. So that's the difference. So the only difference is the name class. This extends on the React component, the constructor, and the way we declare the state, and then the render. So the return part is the same. So it doesn't matter what you put in here. It's the same as the functional component, right? If you want to run anything of JavaScript, you put it inside the render. So you cannot run anything here. You cannot run console log here. It will give you an error, right? So you have to run your console logs here inside the render, and any logic, let's say other functions and things like that you want to run, you put it inside here. So that's anatomy. That's how the difference looks like. All right, so let's get to our lesson today, our example project. So our example project, we're going to be building a shopping list thing where you could put a shopping list and then you could check out and say, okay, I shopped this and that. So that will be what we will be doing today. So before we do anything, here's a functional component and the app component, and it is a functional component. So we want to convert this to class component. So pay attention to this, because this is a very important skill as a React developer to have, where you convert a functional component to a class component, and you convert class component to functional component. So let's convert this. So the first thing I will do is I'll remove this function and I'll say class. Then I'll remove this and I'll say extends. And then I'll say react.component, right? Then this whole return, I'll put a render around it. So I'll just say render, and then render will have a curly bracket, and then the closing curly bracket will go here. And that's it. That's how you convert a functional component to a class component, right? That's the only difference. So we converted this. So the next step would be, let's get started with our project. We need to create a constructor here. So this constructor is gonna hold our grocery list. So let's create that constructor. This constructor will have super, of course. Always you need to have super, and then this dot state will be equal to an object. This will be same in every app. So you have that this dot state. So you have that, and then inside here you put your class, your state objects. So we'll say
the difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, is the difference between this one and the other function, like when you set the state in within the regular function, is it that constructor has all the states in it as a separate function, and that's its purpose?
Yes. So the constructor's purpose is to hold the state, and also other things that that we will maybe touch on later. But the main job of the constructor is to hold the state, right? If you don't have a state at all, you don't need a constructor. You could run your app, you could render stuff here, and you don't need a constructor if you don't have a state.
And it won't work without constructor, right?
If you don't have
put the state.
Yeah. So I mean, there are times that you could actually use without the constructor. So we could. So let's say you have one. There are times actually you could use without the constructor. It's not. It's not 100% required. I think the times that when you can put the state outside is when you have like one state. So let's say we have one thing, we could actually get rid of this and just say, and just run this state.
Okay.
So you could just say, you don't have to even say this, you say state, and then this is how you run. And then you put your state object here, and this will be fine. So this is implied, that it implies that there is a constructor and the constructor is running underneath. But it's good when we're learning, it's good to make it clear that we put a state inside the constructor. And this refers to, what does this refers to? Remember, going back to JavaScript. Remember that this is a function.
To the app,
So
Is it the state, the variable that's in the function?
so this is referring to the constructor itself, right? Because remember that constructor is a function that builds an object, and this usually refers to the name of the object. So this refers to the constructor. So we're basically saying state is part of the constructor. And if you actually go deep into class components and console log everything, like the whole React system, you will see that state is part of the constructor. So when you say this dot state is, remember we when we were doing the functional function constructor, we were doing something like this. This dot height is equal to height. So this means the function itself, and height is part of the function. So now this state is part of the constructor. And if we take out the constructor, we don't need this, right? Sometimes you also see, so, and also in here, we have to render with this dot state in here, and automatically that this refers to constructor. Okay, so in here, we're gonna put the groceries state. So let's say groceries, let's say just groceries. And then in here, we could put an empty array, that's fine. So an empty array. We also need the data for a few objects that we could use. So let's do that. Let's actually leave it. So what you could do is you could say groceries and then set, create an array. Let's create an array. I'm gonna copy a data from somewhere, just a few objects. Let's actually make them very few, so it's not long list. So it's just a banana, tortilla, and milk, right? And the name of them is groceries. So instead of creating an empty array here, we can just set this to the name of this array, right? So that would be fine. So that means the state has all these objects. Or you could just copy all this, copy this, and then set it the normal way that we used to see. So you could just put it right here, like that. That's also fine. Make sure this is not there. Okay, so that's fine too. So let's keep it this way so it's cleaner, and let's actually make it less. Let's get rid of tortilla, right? Like that, comma. So we have two things.
Can you try the other way? Sorry, so I can understand a little bit.
The other way is just we declared a variable, so we just say here const groceries, right? And then we have an object, we have array here, and the array will have these objects. So it will be exactly the same.
And how do you pass that array?
So instead of passing this array here, we could pass just this groceries, or you could say groceries list. You can name whatever you want and pass it here. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing, right?
Oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah. So yeah, let's keep it this way. It's fine this way, either way. Okay, so now if we want to, so now we have the state set up. The next thing we need to do is we need to render that in here. So to render that in here, we have this component. So this component, we need to set it up. So we need to like loop through its state. So let's go back here and pass a prop here. So the prop, we can call it whatever we want. So let's call it items. And this would be our state. So this would be this dot state dot groceries. Keep that in mind. This is important. It's no longer just the state itself. Remember, in functional component, we just say pass just the groceries. That's it. So now you have to actually specify where it is. So this dot state dot groceries. So if we save this and go to this component and console log, this is a functional component. So we'll be fine. Console log props. We do that. You see that here it says items, and then items will have 2 items. I don't know why it's doing that. It's not showing. Okay, yeah, 2 items, 1 milk and 1 for the other one, bananas. Okay, so now we could just loop through here. So our usual, we did this many times. So let me just quickly do this. Instead of this list name, we will do props dot items dot map, and here we can render items, use an arrow function, right? And then inside here, we could loop through all of them. We could render all the things. So to actually render everything, we need to create another component. So we'll create a child component here. We'll call it something like item.js. And this will have, this will render our stuff. So let's actually copy this. It's going to be similar. So we did this many times, so you should be fine. Item. We don't need to console log, and this will have a div, and the div will have, we'll add other things, but for now, let's just render a name. So instead of this, all this, let's get rid of this too. We will render a paragraph with a name. So we'll say props dot item dot name. Okay. So that will render just each item in here. Let's save that. But we didn't pass anything yet. So in here, we have to pass item. Let's import that. And then pass it a, what do we need to pass here? This item. This component. What is it expecting?
Oh,
Props.
It's expecting props, yes. What is the name of the props it's expecting?
The
The
data.
Name is what it's gonna render here. But
No, the
what-
name you're gonna use for the other.
Yeah, so the name I'm gonna use here, that's what's expecting, which is we already declared, which is item, right? So we say here item, and that would be the item right here, this item. So you can name whatever you want here. We could say data, and that we have to change here data. Right? So, and then we close it. So that rendered banana here and milk for us. So that's good. So we have some CSS that we need to set up. Let me see. So when we go back here, save that, save this. Okay. In here, we need to, okay. We need to pass a couple other things later. Let's also pass a key here so that it doesn't give us issues and stuff. It gives us these warnings. Where is the warning? It gives us warning right here. So it says each child in the list should have a unique key. So each item we render needs to have a unique key. So the key would be just the ID. So key is equal to item.id. Remember that each item has an ID right here. We have an ID. Okay.
What if you put ID in the other one as date.now? Then will it still work?
In right here.
No, the place where you have the data for ID for all the other data.
Oh, right here. Yeah. That will work.
State,
Yeah.
in the
So,
state.
yeah, so that will work. So we could just say, I think it's a new date that now or date that now. I'm not sure which one it is. Let me double check.
Does it have to say new?
No, it doesn't have to say new. You can say date that now. And then let me see. Let me double check. Yeah, you just need to have something unique. It doesn't have to be. Okay. I think it has to say new. Date that now or date now JavaScript. So yeah, so let's see that. Okay, it has to be a, yeah, that's what I did. Date that now.
I think the bracket.
Okay, yeah, it's at the end. Okay, put it in the wrong place. Date that now, and then the now is a function, so like that. So now you see the first item will have a will have just a long number like that, random number.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So here we put date that now like that. So that will make it unique. So in the groceries we put we make the key the ID. So that means we'll not get the error, the warning. It's not an error, it's just a warning. So even if you don't put it, it will be fine. But it's best to put it in. Okay, what else we missing? So in item right here, we're just rendering the name, but also we need to render something else, which we will, we have to create a click method here, but we'll get to that. So let's go back to app.js. So app.js, we have the state set up, everything set up. Let me see if we have some CSS we need to do. Yeah, the CSS is fine too. Okay, so we passed that. So now what we're trying to do is a list where we can click this and it will toggle. It will say, it will put a cross around, basically saying we'll finish this. So to do that, we need to create a function that does that for us. Okay, let's see. So, and also we need a form here. We need a form where we can actually, let me open this in a new tab. We need a form, a small form here, which will, we can add.
Can you go back?
Yeah,
Can you just give me, I was keep listening to the connection, I think.
Okay.
Just trying to know how you pass data around throughout the components, the way you pass the props.
Yeah. So we have the state here. This is our state groceries. So this that state, that groceries is our state. We created a component called grocery list, and we passed a prop, and the prop will be the state right here, as you can see, our current state. So right here, we looped through that prop right here, and then every item, every grocery list item, we send it to this component. So this component is the item right here we created. So right here is how we send it to it. So this is rendering the name of that of each grocery list, and that's how that's how we get in the milk and banana. Yeah. So this is all it's doing is rendering. You could actually call this, if you want, grocery card, because you guys remember that we did the movie card. So we could call this grocery card. So let's make it similar to before. And here we have to change grocery card. Okay, I'm not sure the spelling. Hopefully that works fine. Yeah. So
and
that
the item, where is the item coming from? You see it says grocery
right
key. Yeah.
So yeah, this item is coming from because we're inside a map function.
Oh, okay.
So the map
yeah,
function returns, returns one thing each time. So it's returning item. You could call it whatever
yeah,
you want.
I got it.
Yeah. So that's our setup. We have our list here. So another thing we need to do is we need to create another component. We'll call this a list form. So this would create a form, a small form, where we can add new items, right? So we'll get to that. So let's see. So let's see if we're missing anything here. We have the state. Remember, I said that we can add new. If you want to add another state, you have to put it here. So you could put another state here, and then set it to something like that. So, and then that's how you can create other states. Okay, let's see. So everything looks good so far. So let's just start with the form first, because you guys remember we did the form, but now this time we're gonna do the form in class, right? So we did the form in last 2 lectures. We did a form 2 times. So this time we're gonna go quicker, but I'm gonna explain only the difference. So here we're gonna import React from React. And of course, here we're going to say class, and let's call it list form extends React component. And this will have constructor. Let's set up a quick constructor. And the constructor will have super and also a basic state. So state here, this will have, let's call something like, it'll have item text, right? And this will be empty. Remember that that's how we set up every form. You have to have an empty state, and then you could modify the empty state. And then let's set up a quick form. I'm gonna copy the form part. So let me complete the render here. And then inside the render, we return. Okay. All right, so inside here, let me put a quick form that we already set up. Form. We don't need to return do the form again because we already did that. So now, if we save this, we need to export, of course. Export default form list form. Okay. Now we're gonna render that in here. So right underneath the H1, that's where we're gonna render it. So it's gonna show really nice because of the CSS I set up. List form, it's gonna import for us. This we will pass a function here, which will add the items to the state. So, but for now, let's just render that form. Save this. And as you can see here, voila, we have a nice form that's set up for us. Okay. So nice form. There's nothing, we cannot write anything to it right now. The reason for that is it's not even controlled. If you say add, it will refresh the whole page. So you all know how that works when it comes to forms. So let's go back to the form list. Just kind of explain, we have here on submit. So this will be the function that we're going to use, handle submit. Remember that in, you guys haven't learned this, but in class component, if you want to grab a function, you have to say this and then the function name. Instead of before we were saying just the function name. And here you see handle change or just a handle change. We have a function to handle the changes. And then the name is item text, which is right here. Our state is the name because we just need one thing. That's it. So now let's create the changes, the handle change and the handle submit quickly. So the handle. So there's one thing that we need to understand when we're creating functions, and we will talk about that more when it comes to the app.js. We're going to create a function here. But before we get to that, if you want to create a function here, so we're going to create functions right here, not inside the render. Inside the render, we run anything that's like related to like console log or like destructuring, things like that. But inside here, you could write the function. But there's one way you could do it. If you do the normal way, if we do something like this, and we say, or say like function handle change, and then event here, and then run the usual way, this will not work. It will actually give you an error to start with. Secondly, even if you make it work, it will not work. So you have to, if you do this, you have to bind this function to the constructor. So you have to say something like this. You have to say this dot handle change equal to, and then you have to say this dot handle change dot bind, and then this. You have to write all this stuff for this to work, and you do not want to do this. So we can get rid of this. If you don't want to do that, there's an easy way to do it. You don't need to declare, you don't have to say const handle change. And this is an arrow function. Of course, it's the same as the one we just did. If you say this still, you have to do the binding. So what I usually do is I write down the arrow function and then I get rid of the const. And that's it. That's all you need to do. You have to get rid of the const or let or whatever you're using. You have to get rid of it. And this will work. This is a method for this class now. And we could use this. So this will work fine. So just keep that in mind, that if you want to write a function inside a class component, you always need to get rid of the const. And also you cannot use a normal function. You have to use an arrow function. That's let me write that down. It's an important point. When creating a function in class, get rid of const and use arrow function. Okay, that's really important. And here we put our event.
How do you make reference? How does it connect?
So now this function is a method for the class, right? So now remember that
it's outside the parenthesis, right?
It's outside the constructor, and it's considering this to be a method. So
That's weird.
Yeah, so we did in JavaScript, when we do the class, you declare the methods similar to this, right? This is how you declare them. And in normal JavaScript, you don't have to use an arrow function, but in here we're in React, so it's a little bit different, the execution. So let's go back to the handle change. So in here, handle change, all we have to do is we say this dot, we're modifying this item right here. So we don't have to do any of the things we did before. So all we do is set state, and then we say, we put an object here, and then we say, okay, item text, and then we're gonna modify this. And then we say event dot target dot value. That's all we need to do, right? Because now we have only one thing. But if we have another object here, then we have to copy this first and then modify what we need to modify inside, right? So that's the only difference. That's why this looks simpler than before. So we have the handle change. Now we need to create the handle submit. And if you watch the last two lectures, this is very familiar to you. Okay, the handle submit, and then the handle submit, we need to first, what is the first thing we need to do? So there's no change about inside the function. What did we do? The first thing we did in handle submit.
Stop submitting the default submitting.
Yep. So we say event, and we have to put the event here. So event will be whatever you're clicking, whatever you're doing. So event and then prevent default. Prevent default, that'll be a function. Okay. So that'll be the first step. So that means do not do any refreshing. So when you click here, submit, no refreshing. And now we could actually write stuff here and it will not refresh the page. So we have to handle what happens after that. So what we will do is we need to send, remember in our first lesson, every time we submit something, we need to send it to another function, right? So we have to create a function here that handles that. So we will call that function. So this would be this dot props. And in class component, if you want to grab anything from the props, you have to say this dot props, and you don't have to declare it anywhere. Actually, you have to declare it somewhere. Sorry, you have to declare it here in the constructor. You declare it in the constructor here, and then every time you want to grab the props, you say this dot props. You cannot, if you do this, this will not work. This dot props. So this dot props, and then of course the function here. So we'll create a function here that will handle the add-in. So we'll call this something like what should we call add item. Add item, and this will take the current state, which is this. So this would be this dot state dot item text, which is this, right? And that's it. So save this. We were done with this form. Now we could actually test it, but it will not work because we're not calling this function doesn't exist. So what we need to do is we can console log the result. So this will be this state dot item text, right? Console log it. So now if we open the console log, you'll see that when I type something here and I add, it shows here. So instead of it showing here, we want it to become part of this list. All right. Does that make sense? Any question about that so far? And this will make a lot of sense if you have watched the last 2 lectures. The only difference is the way we set up in the class. Okay. So now let's create that function inside here, inside app.js. So who can remind me, what do we do here if we want to create a function inside a class? We just did it a minute ago. Let's say that it's called the add item, this function.
You bring the name of the function.
The name of the function. So that will be add item, this add item. And then what do we do?
Empty price.
Okay.
Yep. So arrow function, basic arrow function. So here we will pass whatever we send from here. So from our form lesson, you'll remember whatever we send from here, we have to put it in here. So this would be just like an item, and then like that. So now in here, whatever goes in here, we have to add it to this state. I mean, the grocery state only. So that would be, this is how we will add that. Okay, so you have to say, so this would be a little bit more complicated than before. That's because we have to first loop through the groceries. And then if the item is not already in the list, I mean, if the ID is not the same, then we will add it. If the ID is the same, then we can't add it because it's already in there. So we have to check that. So first we have to say this dot set state. That's how we change the state, right? And inside here, we create an object. Inside this object, we will do the check-in. So first what we're gonna do is we're gonna check if the groceries, if the item is in the groceries. If it is, then wait, so give me a second. Actually, it's yeah, sorry. So actually, this is going to be the same as before. We don't have to check. I was confused with the toggle one. So we have to do toggle later, which means like we have to, when we click this, it has to toggle. It has to say cross out, and then, you know, we have to check that. But for adding, all we have to do is create a new variable. So this would be new item. So it will be exactly the same as we did before. And here, in here, we have to grab the current state. So remind me, how do we copy the state? A shallow copy of the current state. We want to modify it.
Use a spread operator.
Spread operator, okay? So a spread operator like this. How do we select the state? Groceries state.
This dot state.
Yep, this dot state dot, what else? Groceries, right? Groceries, yep. So that's how we select this state, and we're making a copy of it. This is a shallow copy. And then we add something to it, and that will be our item. So right here, we just say item. That's how we add something to it. Now the last thing would be to just, so we could do that. That would be one way. But we also have to, give me a second. We have to tell which object to actually modify, right? So let's go back before we do this. Actually, let's get rid of this. Let's go back, reverse back. Okay, so we have to tell what to change, because we cannot give it the whole object. We're only changing maybe like the item name, and also we have to add, remember here, we have to add purchase, right? So we're adding here a like the name. So right here in the list, all it's adding is the name, not the purchase, and not the date. So purchase would be if this is already purchased or not, right? So we have to add that too. So let's go back and add that. So let's say actually const new item, right? And then we basically say what we add in. So the first thing would be the name, and the name would be the item, of course, this item. So this, and then we will add the ID. ID would be, of course, the date. So that would be the date here, just like this. Okay. And then the last thing we want to add is the purchased. So the spelling has to be exactly the same. And this will be by default false, because when you add item the first time, it's not purchased yet. So that'll be it. So now let's then modify this state. So this would be what we just did. We could create a new variable, but let's put it inside the set state. So inside set state, we say groceries right here. Groceries is equal to, and then here's where we use the spread operator. This dot state dot groceries, and then we're modifying this. So this item. Okay. So this is how we add it. First thing we need to do is we need to actually identify what we need to change. We're changing the name, but we're keeping these the same. We're grabbing the current date, and then we're keeping the purchase false. And then we modify the state. So we say set state, and then we said, okay, grab the state called groceries, and then grab a copy of it, and then modify that copy with our item here. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Any question about this part?
What's the new item? Is that an object or
This is an
the
object.
whole thing? Okay.
This is an object. It's the new object we created, and you could also call this new object if you want. So what we did is the only thing we changed is the name. That's the only thing we changed. The date automatically grabs the current date, and this is by default false. Later we have to change it to true. So we took this whole object and we send it to the state, right? We copied this state and then we added this new object. Because now we have all these objects. It's like saying grabbing this object and adding right underneath this one, doing that like that, right? That's what we're doing basically. and the name would be what comes from the form, right? So that's what we're doing in our component. So now, if we add something here, it should work. So let's add water. Okay, so we have some issue here. Oh, okay. So I know where the issue is. Who can tell me where the issue is coming from? Why is it not adding?
Can you go back to the error so I can see it?
Yeah,
You
sorry.
need, Mal,
Yeah.
you need to send the new data to the state.
We did. So we grab, we have the object here, which is the new data, and then we send it to the state right here. And also, if you go back to the list form, right here, it's giving us error actually here. Why is this giving us error? It's saying, basically it's saying the add form, the add item function is not even, it doesn't even exist. That's what it's saying.
I think it's a wrong name.
So here is the component list form. And we're expecting it.
We
Yeah.
didn't pass it.
Yep. So we didn't pass the function. We didn't send this function to the list form. It doesn't know what that function is, and we're expecting it every time we add. We're expecting it to send it the data to that function. So we have to pass it as a prop, right? Right here. So add item will be the name of the prop, and the prop thing that we're passing, the value we're passing is the function. So how do we actually declare the function here? Should we just say add item?
No, this dot.
This dot, yes. So remember, every time you're declaring a function, you have to say this dot add item, which is this. So now if we save, it should work, hopefully. Water. Yes, right there. And let's say something like clothes. This should be groceries, but whatever. Clothes, yeah, right there. And I'll make this look better in a minute. So does this make sense to you? What this function is doing? Any question about it?
Mal,
Uh,
how do you know you're targeting the name?
Right here.
Yeah.
So the name is coming from here. So this, we could actually call this name and call this name, right? Or let's call it new name. Okay, so this would be a new name. And we're getting this from here. So we're getting from this input, and this input is creating a state, and the state is called item text. This could be called whatever. We could call it new name right here. But we have to change a few places. New name, and change it here to new name. A few more places inside the form, which is right here and here. Okay. So we're sending the name. We're sending the name to this function, add item, right here. We're sending it. So it comes through here, and we can actually console log here. Console log new name. And let's mark it and say, we got new name. Okay. So now if we save it and go back here and we add something new like water, you'll see here in the console log, it says we got new name, that is water, right? So all we're actually changing is the name. And then the rest is right here. We're basically adding a date, and then we just setting the purchase to false, and that's it. And then we send in this object to our current state, which is groceries. And then groceries is rendering here in the groceries list, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And this data state is basically changing the state, it's modifying it. And what is it going to modify? The groceries state, which is this one. And then what do we need to change first, let's copy what's inside there, which is what's already here, like this. And then let's add a new object, which is this. And that will be the new object here. So that's what you're basically saying. And actually, when I hover over it, you can see the kind of like the blueprint of that object.
So we deal with objects, right?
Yeah, go ahead. What did you say?
So we deal with objects right now.
Yeah. So it's all objects right now. Yeah. So this function, all it's doing is adding the new name or the new object to the current state. And that's why it's shown here. When I add water, it adds water here. And the other information too.
Can you go to line 50 where we pass the props? So we have add item.
Mhm.
That's the prop, right?
That's the name of the prop, yes.
And what is this dot add item? Is that the state? Section within state.
This is the function. So add item is a function, this function we created.
Okay.
So if you want to grab a function anywhere in the class component, you have to say this and then the function name, right? You will see other places here. When we go to list, you see that when we want to grab the handle submit, we say this dot handle submit, this dot handle change. So these are all functions. Okay. Any other question?
Man,
Yeah.
just like to reiterate what you said now. So if you want to grab the function, you say this dot, the name of the function. But
Yep.
and then if you want to grab like drop or like variable, you say this dot state stop and the name.
So if you want to grab anything from the state, then if the state is inside an array, then you say you have to loop through it, of course, right? Because you have multiple objects. But if it's just an object, one object, so if it's like one object here instead of all this, then you could say this dot state dot groceries dot name, right?
Okay.
But if it's an array, then you have to loop through this and then grab what you need from there.
Okay.
Any other question? Okay, so let me, so here we have everything now. The only thing's missing now is we need to toggle it. And also I need to make it look better. I'm not sure why it's not showing that the way I wanted it. Let me see. I'm checking my example. We're missing some class somewhere. Okay, let's go to a list, grocery list. So, oh yeah, I think we're missing. No, okay, let's see. So grocery list, we need to have this class, shopping list, and then inside it will be fine. Items, let's see that one. So item we need to have, or now we call it grocery cart. We need to have a div, and then there's no class on the div, but there is a class called purchase that we could add. So right here, we could add a class called purchase, and we need to change that class later. So class name is equal to purchased. So let's see if that helps. Actually, didn't change. So class name.
Do you have to import the CSS?
No, I think there's a class called item here. The CSS is shown here. It's imported here. So it should be fine now. Okay, yeah, it's shown now. So the class is item. So right here, class item. And then we're gonna change this so that we can modify it according to if it's checked or not. So when we click it, it should put a cross, and then it should change the color too. But now this is how it should look like water. Add water like that. Milk. We already have milk. Veg. vegetables or veggies. Okay, like that. So, and also we can clear this easily. Who remembers how do we clear after we submit in the form?
Set state to the initial state.
Yes. So set state to initial state. And what is our initial state here in this class? Which line is it? The initial state.
Line 8.
Line 8. So this is our initial state. This is the original state. And then after that, we modify with the form. So in here, underneath the after submit, we say this dot set state. And then we just change the item. Now we call it, what do we call it now? New name. Set it to empty, right? Like that. So now if we add something here, fruits, it should be empty. Okay. All right. Any question before we take a break and then come back and work on the toggling these? Any question? All right. I'll see you guys in 10 minutes and then we'll finish it up, inshallah. So 10-minute break. 10-minute timer. Okay. See you soon. All right. Let's get back to it. All right, let's do it. So we need to add, hopefully you guys can hear me. We need to add we need to add functionality where we can toggle, click any of these items, and it will put a line across it. It will say, done basically. So we need to add that. And that functionality, we need a function to start with. And then we need to pass that function across the components all the way to grocery card, where we will change the CSS. We will toggle a class, and then if the item is checked, we will not toggle that class. So the class is called purchase. So if we actually put here a class called purchase like that and save it, you'll see that all of them will have a cross, and then we'll have the color changed. So we need this when we click it, we need that to happen. So we need to toggle this purchase class. So let's do that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to identify which one do we need. When we click one, how do we know which one we clicked, right? So we have to loop through the items, and then depending on which one we clicked, then that's the one we're gonna go through, right? So yes. Okay, sorry about that. So so when we click one, we need to go through all the items, and then depending on which one we clicked, we need to toggle that. So let's create that function. We're gonna call it toggle, basically. Keep it simple. Toggle item, and then in here toggle item. Sorry, we need to pass what we need to toggle. So the way to identify is by the ID. So we use the ID. Okay. So inside this function, we need to loop through all our state, and then we need to identify this ID is coming from the grocery card. So when we click any item in here, we're gonna use a click method here, or click function. That click function will send an ID. So it will identify which one we're clicking actually. So in here, we need to loop through our items and then compare the ID that's coming from here to the ID of any of these objects, right? And if that's true, then that's the one we're gonna toggle. That's the one we're gonna add the cross, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So we're gonna implement that. So to start with, we're gonna say this dot set state, right? And then inside here, we will grab which state are we talking about, which is the groceries. So the groceries. So now in here, we need to loop through all the items in the state. So all these items, we need to loop through them. So easily we'll use a map that groceries dot map, right? And inside the map, of course, we need a item to keep track of all of them. And let's just keep it simple to say item, right? So item, and then this item will be an arrow function. Okay. So I'm missing one more thing here. I'm missing that. Okay. What are we missing here? Map, item, another function here. Let's go back. I usually like to restart. Sometimes it gives you issues. Let's get rid of all this. Yeah, I think we have 2 of these, which we don't need. Yeah, let's just restart again. So this will be this set state. Inside here, we have to grab the state. So that would be groceries. And we're going to be changing this groceries, groceries. We're going to be mapping over it. And inside here, we're going to grab an item. And this item would be an arrow function. So that should work. I'm not sure why this is not working. What is it saying? Expect a return. Okay, yeah, of course. We'll return something here. So we have to return something here. Okay, so now, before we return anything, we need to compare two things. We need to compare the ID we're receiving from the click, so the click that happens here, to the item.id, which is any of this. So any of this, the ID of that, we need to compare those two. So that's what we need to do. So we need to use if statement to compare that. So we're going to say item.id. If the item.id is equal to ID, which is what we received, then we will say return. We will return first. We'll return the whole item, which is this. The item, one of these. So like this one, we'll return all of it. So a copy of it, of course. So that'll be the item. Secondly, we will change one thing, and that will be this purchase. So we will change that to true. So we'll say purchased. We'll change it to true, but we want to toggle back and forth. How do we do that? How do we keep it so that when we change it to true, we can also go back to false? Who remembers?
Ternary
That-
operator. You can use that.
Ternary operator. Okay, that makes sense. But there's easier way. So
Opposite. You're
The
gonna set it to
oppo- the opposite. So in JavaScript, there's a way you could set things to the opposite. So actually, let me just do it. To set something to the opposite, so usually a Boolean. So if you have a Boolean, because this is false or true, so you could either have false or true. If you have a Boolean, if you want to toggle back and forth, you could just say like that, false. And then if you have a thing that you could flip through, like you could just, if you have a click, then it will go back and forth. So it'll become false, it'll become true. Now, if we do this, this is not false, right? So this is not. So this is true. So in here, all we need to do is we need to say exclamation mark, and then grab the item dot purchase, right? Item dot purchase, and that will be initially it will be false, but when we do this, it becomes true, right? And then if you click it again, it will go back to false. So it will go back and forth. So that's what we do. So now this should work. One last thing we need to add is we need to make sure we need to return the rest, right? So when we click here and this one is crossed out, we need to return these. Otherwise, all of them are going to be crossed out, or we're not going to see all of them, right? So we need to return. So to return it, we need to go to this if statement to make sure that you see where things are, like the curly brackets. So this one, when I click, you see this one is the one that it's connected to. And here we say else return item, right? Else return item. We're just gonna return the items that are not crossed out. And that's it for this function. Anything that doesn't make sense in this function for you. It's not an easy function. It's a little bit complicated, but any question about it? What it's doing? So in general, here we need to change the purchase to false or the other way around, right? If it's true, then we change it to false. If it's false, we change it to false. To do that, we need to actually check which item are we actually talking about. So that's where the mapping comes through. And then we use if statement to grab the direct one, the one we're looking for, and we compare the ID that we receive from here. We'll add an on-click here to the ID that is in the object. So item.id. And then after that, we'll copy the whole item, the whole object. We'll make a copy of it, and then we will change only the purchase to the opposite of what it is, right? And the rest will return right here. Okay. Now we need to send this function to grocery cart. I need help with that. How do we send this function toggle item to grocery cart? Because it's not in here. It's not anywhere in here. How do we
Do
do
you
it?
add it as a prop?
We will add it
You go
as
to the component.
we'll add it as a prop, but it's not the grocery cart is not here, and we don't want it to be here. So where do we send it through? Remember that we have to do a prop drilling, meaning we have to go through another component to get to that component. So which component should we go through to get to the grocery cart?
Wherever you import, where did you import it into?
If you see grocery list, we actually have the grocery cart here, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is where we need to pass the function, but first we have to pass that function to the grocery list, right? So we have to pass it through here. So we will say here, toggle item is equal to this dot, then the toggle item function. Does that make sense? Usually when you have two things that you're passing through, you make it two lines so that it looks like this nicer way, like that. So we're passing this state, which is the normal thing that we had, which shows the list of items. And we're also passing the toggle function to grocery list, but we're not sending this for the grocery list. We're sending it for the grocery cart. So we're doing something called prop drilling. So we send in a prop to the grocery list, and the grocery list is sending another prop, the same prop, to grocery cart. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So let's go here, grocery list, and then right in here we have to pass that same thing. We could just literally copy the name of it and everything, and go here, but it's going to be a little bit different here. So when we pass it through here, we have to we're passing it through props. We're not passing it through, the function is not in here. So we cannot say this, just only. So we have to say, and also this is a functional component, so we cannot say this anyways. So we have to say props, right? So props, if we actually check the props here, it will have that function, props in grocery list. And we save this, go back here, props in grocery list. We have two props, we have items, and we have toggle item, which is a function, right? Then now, if we go here, grocery cart, and the props, they have that function. So we could use that function now. So we could say props dot toggle item, and then use it. Any question about that before we move on? How we pass the function from here to grocery list right here, and then all the way to grocery cart, which we can actually console log here if we want. Console log, and here we could say props in card, let's say. Let's say props. We go back here, props in card. So you can see the data, which is the object, and then the toggle item function. Okay. All right. So now let's use that function to make it so that when we click this item, that function runs basically. And also we have to use a ternary operator to make sure that we either have the purchased class, right? Purchase class or not. So we need to remove it or have it. So we have to use ternary operator inside here, all this. So let's actually get rid of this first and then add a onClick here. And you could stop me at any time if you're confused about all this. So let's add onClick here. This onClick is basically when we click any of the items. So this onClick will have a callback function like usual. This callback function will be the function we pass through right now, which is props dot toggle item. Okay, and we're gonna give an ID to this toggle item function. So this is the ID we're gonna pass. It's expecting an ID here, right here. It's expecting this ID. So we're gonna pass the ID of the object that it's currently rendering here in the card. So that would be props dot what did we call it here? Actually, try here, props dot data dot ID, right? So when we click, that's what's gonna show. That's what's gonna come. Now, the next thing we need to do is inside here, still inside where we put the class, we're gonna create a class here, class name. And this class name, we're gonna use JavaScript, right? Because we wanna use a ternary operator. So to use ternary operator, we have to use a JavaScript literal, template literal. So we're gonna use template literal here. And we're gonna say the first class we had was item. We need that, right? And then the next thing is we're gonna do the template literal. So we're gonna say here, if we're gonna say first, so we're doing a ternary operator. So we're gonna say grab the purchased, right? So to grab the purchase, we say we just say props dot data dot purchase, and then we're gonna say if that let me see if I'm doing it right. So actually, yeah. So if this is true, so if this is true, then we're gonna say, if this is true, then we're gonna say add a class called purchased. So if we're basically saying if you have the purchase, if it's true, then add the class called purchased. If not, don't add anything. That's what we're basically saying. So if not, then you say nothing here. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're saying, okay, we need the class called item in general, but let's check the purchase. If the purchase is true, I mean, if it's true, then you add this. And why is this if it's true? Why am I not declaring that, you know, you don't see anywhere where it says if this is true or not. So this is part of JavaScript, actually, JavaScript quiz. So how do we know this is true or not? Any guess?
Because you use ternary operator.
We use ternary operator, but this is like normal if statement. So this is the condition. So this would be like, let me just put something here. This would be like if props dot data dot purchase is equal to true, then add purchase as a class, right? Otherwise, else is leave it empty, right? Don't add this purchase. So this ternary operator, that's what it's doing right here. But we don't have this. We're not comparing anything to true. Keep in mind that this is a JavaScript thing. And actually you might be asked in an interview, if you do this, if you just say this, by default JavaScript, it's underneath, it's saying, it's setting this to true. it's setting this to true by default, right? So you don't have to say this. You don't have to say equal to true. The only time you do this is if you want to set this to false. So it doesn't set it by default. It doesn't set it to true to false. So it sets to true. So that's why we're saying here. I'm saying if purchase is true, like if this purchase is true, then we're saying add this. If not, don't add any class. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And this on click is basically triggering this function right here, the toggle function, and it's passing the ID, the current ID we have. So let's test this out. This should work by theory. So if we click this banana, it should have a cross, and then it should change the color. Oh, it did. The problem is it did to everything. So not only one thing. So we need to find out where that problem is coming from. This is kind of like, you will have this problem when it comes to like building an application. You'll have a error, an issue like this, and then you have to go back to your code and figure out where you did something wrong. So that's what we're going to do. I don't know what the problem is, and I don't know where the problem is coming from. So I'm sure somewhere here in the function, we're not doing something right. So let's check that. Let's go back to it and see. We're saying ID. You could do console login. You could console log if you're receiving the ID. So we say here, it should work if so here we say ID, so ID. So now if we click anything, it should show here the ID right there, the ID. So it's working. So return the item, and then purchased should be item.purchased. Okay. Else return then item. So in general, I don't see any issue in here. This should work normally. Let's go back to here. Let's double check everything is the way we want it. So first on click, and the on click will have the function, which we will pass the ID. Let's check if that data here is actually right. Data is right. So toggle item. Let's double check that. That should be fine too. Toggle item. And then item here. So item, and then we're saying props.data.purchase. And then we're saying add this. If not, don't add anything. I don't see an issue, to be honest. Class name. Okay. We do that.
Oh, is it dot name is both
Data.name.
that name here?
yeah, name is I think for both banana and
Okay, so refresh. Click one of them. It's clicking one of them. So the ID here is one of them. If we check the list, one should be false. Both are true right here. So that is not good.
is it the name dot data dot name when you loop through it? Dot name is for both. Is that why?
It's for both, but now this should be one item. So now we can actually console log. We can console log the ID, which we actually did. But let's console log. Let's console log the props here. Console log props. Let's say props.data name, or just data. Okay. Clear this, refresh. Maybe we didn't save stuff. So usually double check if you saved. Click one of them. And now it's milk ID. Oh, okay. Here's the thing. Here's the problem. So both of them, they have the same ID, right? As you can see from here. So we need to change the ID. The reason, who can tell me why the ID is problematic for these two?
They're
Because
the
they're the
same time.
So this is not showing the time. This is showing, yeah, it's the same time. So we need to like change the ID, modify the ID. Yeah, so these are already in the system. If we actually add a new one here, so if we add water like that, and let's just refresh, add the water, and click the water. As you can see, the water is only checked, but these two have the same ID, so that's why it's showing that. So let's call this 1 and let's call this one 2 for now. But the rest will have the, when we add them, they will have a new ID right here. That's why where the problem is coming from, right? Because the ones we had already set up, they have the same ID. The ones we add, they will have a new ID.
But what if the new water one just has a different date dot now? Oh, okay. Now
Yeah.
it makes sense.
So every time you add it, it will add it with the ID of the current time. So exact the time we have right now. So that's why it's different. So if we add, as you can see here, we added this, it ends with 335. If we add something else like, let's add some random stuff, it has a different time, as you can see here. And this, we made these two different. So now if we click one of them, it will toggle only one. And as you can see, we can toggle back and forth, so that and that is happening because of this. We made it back and forth, so it works that way. Any question about that?
You can see the console log when you click and back and forth.
Oh yeah, the truth and it's changing the false. Yeah. So if you click this, wait. Yeah. So this one's true, this one's false, and the water is false. This is true. So now these are two true, water is false. Yeah. Any question about the setup? Everything connected? The thing is, like, the assignment you guys are going to be doing a to-do list application, and it's going to be exact the same thing. So you're going to be having a toggle, you're going to be adding items. So you're just going to be using exact same methodology here, or setup, right? So this is a toggle. This is how you toggle things. And this is how you add items. And you have to set it up this way for the application to work. And the list form depends on what you want to add. If you want to add more things, you have to declare it here. Otherwise, if you just want to add one text, then this is how you add one text. Any question? Okay. All right, let's see the assignment. Let's go here. So assignment is to-do app. It's already set up for you. You should probably have the CSS. I'm not sure. Let's see. No CSS. So it should be basic bare minimum. But you should be able to set it up. And also another thing would be, let's see, components. So you have all the components set up for you. No CSS, so you have to set up your own CSS. Let's see, yeah. So set up all the components, and then go ahead and get started. So I will say, just go similar, like you see here, bare minimum. This is what we're looking for. So we want a form, add, and then you could have a clear, or you could add a check, which will check which one is already done and which one is not. So that's your job. And this would be the kind of like the object, basically the blueprint that I'm going to be using. Any question? Yeah. And read this through. So it's going to give you what you need to know about the different components. Any question? Okay, so Ahmed asked me, what CSS framework have you used for this project, or did you use your own CSS? So if we look at here, my CSS file, I coded out the CSS. So I didn't want it to use another framework because that will confuse you guys. It will add more complexity because the project is already complex. So I didn't want it to add more complexity to it. So it's a few CSS classes that I set up: the header, app, shopping list item, and then the form. And then I set up the, what was it? The purchase somewhere in here. Yeah, item.purchase. So that will give it a line across the text, and it will also give it a background of that. It's pretty easy. So you could use this if you want. You could use the CSS if you like. So feel free to copy anything from this project, modify it, but make sure you submit the project, and please submit the other projects too. If you haven't finished something, send it. You have time, but we don't want to move on, and then you don't have enough time to finish all of them. So try to submit as many assignments as you can. Make sure they're complete. Make sure if you're stuck, you contact with me, and then inshallah we can go over it. You can set up a time with me. I'm usually available anywhere between 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Throughout every day. And then on the weekends, I'm available too. On Saturdays, so all day Saturday, you could contact me, inshallah. So feel free. Can you pass the notes? Yeah. So if you wanna use this, I can copy and send it to you. Yep. So the one from last lecture, I think I shared it. So it's right here. So you could go back to the channel, inshallah, you will see it. Otherwise, send me, if you don't find it, let me know. I'll send it to you, inshallah. Okay. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Try to submit your assignments, inshallah, so things don't pile up, and later you're gonna feel a lot of pressure. So inshallah, we're gonna finish this soon. We don't have a lot left, so we're gonna finish this. We only have like one more lesson left, and then a sprint project, and then we only have the state management, and then after that we're gonna do the build week. So we're just gonna finish this quick, inshallah. So take care.
How many days is the build week?
Build week is 2 days. So as usual, the other assignment.
No. That's the sprint project. I mean,
the build week. Sorry. So the build week is gonna be 2 weeks. So as usual, we used to do. We did as a part-time students. You do 2 weeks. So inshallah, you're gonna be doing 2 weeks. So you're gonna use projects you built it before, or maybe new projects, and you're gonna implement a React on it, right? So you're gonna build a React on top of that, redesign the whole thing using React, the HTML, the CSS, everything using React, and then add functionality to it like toggling, slider, things like that, and make it look nice. And then also forms, you have to use forms, and then use also an API to send out, create an API for you. So a backend API, that's actual API, not a test one. And then when we submit a form, it needs to send it to that API, and then it will show somewhere else. So that's going to be kind of like interesting. Okay, so inshallah, I'll see you guys next time. Let me know if you have any question. All right, take care.